Hello, welcome to Murder Analysed, and let's have a chat about murder now on this YouTube channel. So today is not a case. We're going to talk about this forensic genetic genealogy, which is coming into force, not just for old cold cases, and some are 50 years old. Some of these cases are fascinating, but they are also the most disturbing, because don't forget, in them days, these predators didn't give a shit what they were doing, right? They didn't, because they never thought they was going to get caught. And it's extraordinary what's going on in the world of DNA. And so I want to highlight some of what's going on throughout this video and podcast, so you to understand where I'm coming from when I do these next maybe 8 to 10 cases that I've got on them, and they'll be coming up very shortly. So I hope you enjoy. You know what to do. Subscribe, hit the like bell, hit the notification bell, and follow me not only on Murder Analysed, but also you can follow me now on Let's Have a Chat About Murder. And you can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and all them sort of places. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this. Leave me some comments and tell me what you think. I'll speak to you all soon, but I hope you enjoy the video. So let's look at today's sort of thing that we're going to delve into, because before we go on to a load more cases about unsolved crimes, cold cases, we want to talk about this new technology that's really come out, I suppose, from about 2019, 2018 maybe. So we're going to delve into this world of forensic genealogy, genetic genealogy, also known as investigative genetic genealogy. This innovative subdivision, I suppose, of forensic science is revolutionizing the way that I suppose that we solve crimes by using genetic information and identifying suspects or victims. I suppose when we look at this sort of thing and the new technologies that's coming out, DNA has been fantastic. It's fantastic. It can help solve crimes. It can help people, whether they have been charged with a crime. It can either make them guilty or help them to be eliminated from any investigations. As we go forward with this technology now that's come out with this DNA, this enhanced DNA way of doing things, it's a lot more cheaper than ordinary standard DNA. It's where they break down the DNA and then redo it and have a look on where everyone's put out there, looking for ancestry DNA, and so we can find out where we come from, all about us, all about our history, all the way back. So this discipline has used that to enhance now and to solve lots and lots of cold cases, which is really, really important for, I suppose, crime in the future, for murders, to solve murders, to help solve unsolved crimes that have really eluded the police for many, many years. When we talk about investigations of crime and the investigation, especially of murder, sometimes it's looking for a needle in a haystack. And especially 30, 40, 50 years ago, that was exactly it. It was that difficult to get a match or to find anything like a blood match or a fingerprint match. And I think the DNA, what we're using today, you have to give credit, don't you, to these people that investigated them crimes with the technology they had in them days, which wasn't a lot. We didn't have CCTV. We didn't have mobile phones, so we couldn't track their phone. We couldn't track their car, number plate recognition. No one even thought about collecting DNA from a crime scene that would be used later on. That didn't happen until about the 80s, to tell you the truth. And even then, it wasn't the greatest. So when we look at crimes that are 50 years old, and some are even older now, one, we have to give the investigators at time really respect, because the only way these cases can be solved today is that if we, all them years ago, that these investigators saved and protected that evidence. They took swabs from a sexual assault. They took all this sort of stuff. They cut the fingernails. They took swabs. They did everything they had to do, not realising that 50 years down the line, this would be a breakthrough technology that we could then find a killer from that. So you have to give great credit, I think, to the investigation all them years back. I think all the officers now today in the police and the different agencies that use this sort of technique appreciate that. They appreciate that the work that would have gone in years ago to a case like a murder case, how the information was stored and kept, the stuff they got, from the bodies or anything from the crime scene, so well looked after, so well protected, that all these years later they can pick up this stuff, find DNA. DNA does disintegrates, and it's not the greatest. It doesn't last forever, right? If it's been kept in water, but if it's been kept well, if they'd stored it well, marked it well, didn't contaminate it with anything else, DNA can last absolute years. So it may deteriorate a little bit over them years, but there is still now, with what we've got in this forensic science of this genetic genealogy and the investigation using these techniques, they only need a minute of DNA. That's all they need. And most of the crimes that are now being solved from 40, 50 years ago, it was down to them investigators that have passed away since then, done everything they could to find these criminals, these perpetrators that done these serious, terrible crimes. And it was their forethought that someday, some skill, no one really thought about DNA, but they thought somewhere along the line, some of this evidence that they had collected all them years ago may have come in handy. And so really this is what this forensic genetic genealogy is all about. It's about getting that DNA from cold cases that's been well stored, well looked after by these very early investigators and now used to catch criminals. So this is what this is all about. And it is so interesting, this. And I wanted to explain this before we go on to be doing a lot of these cold cases that have now been solved. And they are some of the most horrific cases, really. And yes, a lot of the perpetrators have now passed away before justice could be served. But what this does is still give the families of these victims some closure. They now know what happened, who done this to their family member, who took their lives. Now, we will be talking about cases of children and different things like that within the next, I suppose, maybe 10 cases I've got on this, really, because they're so fascinating to me, and I hope they are to you. But what this has also done is when you don't have a person who has been charged with this sort of crime, many people were suspects, right? Family members could have been suspects, boyfriends could have been suspects, and that hung over them for many, many years. So what this DNA has also done is eliminated them from that investigation. All these years, someone may have thought that you've murdered someone, people won't talk to you, people think you've done something terrible. There was no proof you couldn't prove what you were saying was true. And I think so it comes from both sides, this. Yes, it's used to get the criminal, to get the perpetrator, to give your family some peace of mind that they've actually finally been caught. And it also shows that these police and these agencies haven't given up over these years. These cases have stuck in their mind. They're continually going back to them. And finally, they're getting some answers. But also, it does eliminate people from the investigation and then gives them the freedom to think, oh my God, I'm vilified. I didn't do this, right? They have eliminated me through the DNA and I'm now free from this burden that's been hanging over me for many, many years. So this case, these sort of cases, and this is where we're going to go into now, is talking about this, how they obtain the DNA samples from the crime scene, then compare them profiles to genealogical databases like those services such as GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, people that have voluntarily given their DNA, people that have put in and used their DNA to search their ancestors. This now is what is being used. So there are some issues, and we'll go through them, about what your DNA is being used for. Some sites state right from the beginning that that's what they're going to be used for. You can actually voluntarily give your DNA to be put into this database. You can donate now to a lot of these databases that help purely just look for and try to really solve cold case crimes. So there's lots of different things that you can be doing now to solve crime. And I always say to someone, when we talk about victims of crime like this, these people have gone, right? They was murdered. They was taken from this world, screaming and shouting, fighting for their life, right? They were, and you'll see this in a lot of these cases. They fought for their life. And these perpetrators got away with this crime for many, many years. Went on with their lives, had children, everything else, and also done other murders on top of that. So this comes down really to, yes, we're solving these crimes through this technique, but it is all about the secondary victims, the families, the people that's left behind, that we want to really focus on in this as well. If you was a victim of crime, or you had a family member that was a victim of crime, especially a serious crime like murder, you would want answers. You would need them answers till the day you died. You would want them. And many, many of these family members have already passed away before they found out what's happened to either their children, their brothers, their sisters. They've already passed away. But there are family members left, and it's them that we must always consider when we're doing these sort of things. This is a great thing for crime. It really is, to solve crime. But we also must talk about DNA in a way that years ago, when these people were perpetrators, they didn't have in their mind that they were ever going to get caught by DNA. That wasn't going through their process. They didn't use condoms. They didn't care what samples they'd left around. No one was thinking about that. When we talk about DNA now, if you're a serial killer or you are what I would call a perpetrator with purpose, right? You go out and you just want to kill. You would be more up to date on this genealogy, this forensic genetic genealogy, than I would. They would understand what not to do. So yes, I think it's really good to solve crimes, and I do think it's going to solve crimes even in the future. One day you're going to have it where really within a few days that profile will come in and the person will be arrested. But they are not going to be the perpetrators. That focus, their mind is focused purely on murder. They will not leave evidence. You will not find that body, because without that body, you have no DNA. These people know what they're doing. They already plan it. A psychopath, a serial killer, is usually highly detailed in what they do. They would never now take the risk. So there's things to this where now we do find bodies, people get closure. All right, they haven't been able to find the perpetrator, but they have been able to put their loved ones to rest. I think that for certain killers now, no, the bodies won't be found. They will make sure. They will destroy them. They will do everything they can to stop being caught, because that is in their mindset to do that. Serial killers are a different breed to your ordinary everyday murders that happen in the streets and stuff like that. They're totally different people. And so are sexual predators. So where you'd have a sexual predator that would someone and leave them alive, will they do that now? So there are pros and cons to this, and we're going to go through them. Let's first start with this basic forensic genetic genealogy combination of this traditional genealogy or genealogical research with a modern DNA analysis to identify individuals involved in criminal cases. But what exactly, I suppose, does this mean? You know, when we talk about it, and especially I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, don't really get it. They can't really understand it. So I'm going to get Adam a little bit later on to explain that to you. So I think we need to take a closer look at the tools and the techniques that's used in this field. And it will go through different things. And hopefully this will make it easier for you to understand as we go through and talk about these cold cases that have been solved through this technique. Amazing as it is, it's fascinating. I'm going to get Adam to go through basically about this forensic genetic genealogy and the first investigations, how they obtain the samples from the crime scene and then compare it to profiles in a genealogical database. So here's Adam.
One of the key challenges in forensic genetic genealogy is the sheer amount of data we need to sift through. But with advances in technology and bioinformatics, we can now handle large data sets more efficiently, making the process faster and more accurate. So, how does forensic genetic genealogy work in practice? Let's break down the process. A DNA sample is collected from a crime scene, typically from biological material like blood, hair, or skin cells. The DNA is sequenced, and a profile is created based on specific markers in the genetic code. This profile is then compared to those in genealogical databases to find potential matches. Using the matches, genealogists construct family trees to identify common ancestors and potential relatives of the person who left the DNA at the crime scene. Investigators narrow down the list of possible suspects or victims by cross-referencing with other information, such as age, location, and historical records. It's a meticulous process that requires both scientific expertise and traditional genealogical research skills.
Oh, thanks, Adam, for that. Great. Now, all considerations really for these privacy concerns that people have issues with, really, especially as they're finding out more and more what their DNA is used for. So, as powerful as it is, I suppose, this forensic genealogy or genetic genealogy is, it's not without its controversies. It's not. Nothing when we start using people's DNA for other reasons, there's always going to be people who have issues with it. So these databases, I think they raise ethical and privacy concerns, really. When you think about, this is us, right? Our DNA is us. It's us. And so there's been a lot of debate about this. And you'll find now that a lot of these sites actually state that they can be used for a process of cold case or crime investigation and stuff like that. And some don't do it, right? There are some now specific ones that don't do it. You can opt in. As I said before, you can even give money and stuff, even a cup of coffee money, to help analyze this DNA and solve these cold cases. So there's a lot going on, really, when it comes to the use of DNA in this sort of way. I think when we have to think about is, do we want to catch killers, serious killers, psychopaths, people that's hurt many, many people over the years? We have so many cold cases, you wouldn't believe it. And I think at the minute they're looking at John Bonet case, aren't they? The young girl, the little kid that was killed in her home many, many years ago. And they're now using this technique now to find out what really happened there, right? Because there was so much controversy around this case. So it's these sort of things that this sort of DNA and analyzation is going to be useful. No one's manipulating it in a way other than that. And as I said, you can opt out or opt in. You can actually provide your DNA to certain sites, and we'll go through them in a little while, that specifically look at cold cases too, and the genealogy of ancestry, to make sure that no one in your family, close relative or whatever, can get away with these sort of crimes anymore. So it's amazing, really. But why solving crimes is undeniably important, it also must be considered that the rights of the individual. People need to fully be informed of how their genetic information might be used and have the ability to opt in or opt out if you choose to. And this is now what's coming in. It's because when you talk about privacy and you talk about ethical stuff, it is our history, it is our DNA that is being used in this. I have no problem with it. I know many of you don't, though some may have issues with it. And so if you're not happy with it, then make sure when you're searching your ancestry history that you use sites that don't, at the moment, use your DNA for this sort of thing. But I have no issue with it. I think it's absolutely fascinating, this and how they're doing it. And as I said, over the years, now it's going to become much more commonplace, where we will be able to catch people much more quicker than we did before. And we've also gone through why I think the other concerns about it is because killers, people that murder people, people that have that agenda in their mind wouldn't care. They're not going to leave the body, right? They're not. So there's two sort of things to this. One is about your privacy concerns, ethical considerations, and the other is about the criminal themselves. How are they going to protect themselves now from not leaving any evidence at all? There's going to be no evidence left at a crime scene, really, not of the perpetrator or the body, because as I said, they need DNA. And most of the DNA that they've been caught with comes from semen and stuff like that from the male. Also, fingernail scrapings where the person has fought for their life. But now I think that's going to change. That's going to make the criminal itself, these sort of perpetrators, really think. Maybe it may be in some way, I suppose, a deterrent, if that's where you want to put it. For some, people may think now before doing it. But when you are talking about a psychopath, when you are talking about someone that can't control themselves, they are killers. They are either born killers, made killers, however you want to look at it. They are going to look at this and think, right, how am I going to get around this? So there are issues with it, as I've said, but privacy concerns. So yes, if you are going to give your DNA to a genealogical database about you and find out about your ancestry or relatives, whatever, it's not necessarily going to add to a criminal investigation, right? It's not automatic unless you do it to the ones that specifically are for that. But yes, there are some that state on their websites now that your information can be used in that. So just check for that. I just want to let you know that. But when we talk about DNA, and we've talked about it for years, haven't we, when it's first come out and how it's progressed over the years and how it's made a difference to so many people's lives when these perpetrators have been caught. It's just amazing, really. And I think it is going to come over the next 5 or 10 years. I'd say 5 years, to tell you the truth, because it's getting so fast now. And they can use minute pieces of your DNA or DNA that's found for this forensic genealogy or genetic genealogy to solve these cold cases and bring justice to these families. I think it's going to be much quicker. It's already much cheaper to do that. We have lots of different people across the world, and especially America and the UK, that are funding this sort of research into it. As I said, you can donate as much as a cup of coffee, £2 or $2, and that will add up over time as people continue to add money to solve these crimes, and that pays for the genetic sort of profile to be done and to find these killers. Listen, it's not easy, this stuff. It's not. It seems great, doesn't it? You think you're going to put it in to a computer and we're going to find it. We're going to find the DNA. Don't forget, a lot of these killers, when we've had the criminal databases that have took DNA and done all this for many years, a lot of these criminals were not on that database, right? They were not. Their fingerprints weren't on it. Their blood type weren't on it. There was no DNA, because a lot of this DNA has already been put in to a database to see if anything flags up with some of these killers. They didn't, because many killers have not been caught at all. If you haven't been caught, you won't have any DNA to look at. So they only take DNA when you're caught for certain crimes. It's getting now a lot more different how they're taking DNA to create these databases. But really, if you haven't been caught, and many serial killers have not been caught, there's about 50 serial killers working in the UK at this point today, right? And some have been working for many, many years, and have never been caught. So it's the same thing as I always say about when we're looking for paedophiles. If they haven't been caught, they're not on the register, right? If they're not on the register, we don't know about them, but there's still millions of them. The same with these sort of killers. They've not been caught because they are very, very understanding of the law and the process of how it works, right? Now, this is why I'm saying with this DNA, they're going to be on this as well. So a lot of people have said, well, DNA must have already been there. They have put their DNA the victim's DNA or the profiles they found of even a suspect. They've put the DNA in and it's come back with nothing, right? So over the years, there's this database that's been built up of DNA, then profiles. But if criminal hasn't ever been caught, his DNA wouldn't match that anyway. So this is where this ancestry comes in, to where we can look through the family right back, and then they determine what's the closest relative to you, and that's how they find them. It's a different way of looking, and that's how they're caught. And some of these people have never been caught at all for anything. And I think in America, they don't take DNA for everything, right? They don't. I think in the UK now, we do. If you're charged with a certain crime, your DNA is taken. But in America, no, and they didn't do it for many, many years because each state in America has its own rules. And so this forensic genetic genealogy is a way of going through, because they've already checked it, their DNA, and it's not come up. So this is the way how they check it, and they go through the backgrounds of families. It takes weeks, it can take months sometimes, to find the closest person it could possibly be. Then, though, they still can't use that DNA even when they found that person, because they've had to manipulate that DNA and stuff. They still need it from that person, right? So the suspect. So now they may have a name for a suspect, but now they've got to find that person, try and get their DNA. Now, whether it's from rubbish that you've thrown out, because once you've thrown out rubbish, it belongs to anybody, really. So the police can go and pick up, and law enforcement do that a lot, actually. They will go, and once you put that rubbish out on the street or in the bin, you've discarded it. That means you've discarded your rights, really, to any property that you thought was yours. So there's that part as well. And then they will look for anything in there, like a can of drink or anything else that can get DNA from. And then that's how they match up now, the forensic genetic genealogy, with the person they suspect. If that then comes back that is a match, then they go and they try and first talk to the person, because you don't want to give anything away. Some of these people that have been caught haven't even been on the suspect list, to tell the truth. They've never heard of him, right? Some have even been questioned and everything else. But a lot of them, no, the police didn't know nothing about their name at all. So they go and they chat, because they now know that's the killer, right? They can actually prove it by DNA now, because they've got not just the forensic genetics, but they've also now got your DNA from something they took from your rubbish or whatever else, or a dropped cigarette or whatever else. They've got it. But now they want to, as the case goes forward, without these people knowing, they want your side of the story, because your DNA could have been on that person for a legitimate reason, couldn't it? You could have had sex with that person, right? And that's why your DNA was there. So what they try and do is get your side of the story, right? And most criminals like this lie. Don't know, never met her, don't, because they don't understand what's coming, right? They don't understand what the police know. And the police don't tell them, because they want that to back up their case. If you deny, right, when you're being under interview, and it's usually just a general interview, you're not arrested for anything, they just usually knock on your doors to have a little chat, because about this crime that happened all these years ago, did you know anything, did you see him, have you ever been in the property? No. And they usually say, no, don't know what you're talking about, never met him, never done anything. Then that's the evidence then that then can be used to say, well, hang on a minute, if you've never known them, you've never met them, you have no interest in them or anything like this, why was your DNA over in the property? Why was your semen in her body, on her underwear, all this sort of stuff? So that's why they don't rush things. So it takes some weeks to get them, and once they've got all that evidence, then the person is arrested. And that's really what's been happening, and how it's been happening now since about 2019. And this is how a lot of these cases have been solved, right? They've been solved through that. So first it starts with all the evidence from the cold case is re-looked at, it's resubmitted for DNA, it's put on then to a database, and it's probably been put onto a database before that, to tell you the truth. Then they look to see if the sample was good enough then for forensic genetic genealogy. As I say, you don't need a lot, and a tiny little bit, to tell you the truth, but they have to make sure that it's because every time you use DNA, you've destroyed it, right? So you must make sure that a lot of these cases, 50-year-old, they're taking a chance, right? This is their last chance in this to find the killer. It isn't like they've got loads of DNA and they can keep using it. As I said, over the years, it does deteriorate a little bit. There's maybe not a lot been left anyway. They're trying now to make sure that if they're going to use this DNA, that they try and get some result, because as I said, it is sometimes a last chance for these victims to have some justice, their families to find who killed their loved ones. So as this case goes through, then you've done your forensic stuff. You've now got your hit as your genealogists have gone through and they've got the hit. They know the person. They find some DNA from that person, right? Or if that person's deceased, they can either exhume the body and take DNA from that if they haven't been cremated, or they go to the closest family member that is so related to them that it could only be them. And the person may have had brothers or sisters and stuff, so you want to eliminate others just to get to that main one. Once you've done all that, they then go and interview you casually, just a general interview, to make sure that you give your story, which can be used in evidence against you to tell the truth, because they know you're going to deny, because you don't understand what the police already know. Then they're going to take you to court, and if you are deceased, I suppose, with these people, at least then the families are told and they get that. If you are not deceased and you're still alive, no matter what age you are, you will be taken to court, and then all this evidence against you will be used, right? So that's how it really works. So I think we've had lots of different cases solved, right? And I'll go through a few of them and the ones we're going to talk about, but I just wanted you to understand more about why this is so important and why you're going to hear lots more about this, especially over the next 5 years, as it becomes much more used, regularly used, daily used. It's going to be a part of our lives, right? As with everything else, it's going to be a part of our lives. And I think now with AI that you have much more ability to search quicker. That makes the time of the investigation scale much quicker by the use of AI, and these databases and everything else can be used much quicker. Forensics are only going to get better. DNA testing is only ever going to get better. Now they understand it, and these companies are focusing just on that, because crime is a terrible thing, right? Murder is a terrible thing. To lose a loved one we're never going to get over it. It's going to be in your life until you die, right? And then probably even all the family members that come along after you will have heard about the murder of your loved one, and it will affect their lives in some way. So it's really important that we embrace this sort of, this technology, that we solve these decade-old mysteries, really. Some cases are so bad, really, and when I go through them, you'll understand why. These people needed to be caught. They needed to be caught, and they deserve to be caught. And these people deserve justice. Their families deserve justice. So let's have a look now at some of the cases that have been solved, right, from this, and also some of the companies now that are purely using this sort of technique to solve cold cases and crime. In Chesterfield County, this Jane Doe, her name was Barbara Ann Hackman Taylor. Now, this case was solved in 2019. The remains of a woman was found in Virginia in 1986, and they were identified as Barbara Ann using forensic genetic genealogy, solving this decades-old mystery. Then we have the Phoenix Canal murders, and this was by Brian Patrick Miller. Now, this case was solved in 2015, and he was arrested in 2020 with genetic genealogy confirmation. You see what I mean? They knew it was him in 2015, but they couldn't arrest him till 2020 until they'd got this genetic genealogy confirmation. Brian Patrick Miller was arrested for the murders of 2 women in the early 90s, and genetic genealogy later confirmed his involvement. So Howard Hardy, these beach murders, Troy D. Driver. Now, this was solved in 2019. Now, the details of this case was the driver was identified as a suspect in a series of murders in Nevada in 1990 through forensic genetic genealogy. And then Janelle Cruz was the last known victim of the Golden State Killer, and that was solved in 2018. The murder of Janelle Cruz, the last victim, was solved along with other cases attributed to Joseph James D'Angelo, who was a police officer. Now, St. Louis case of Jane Doe, Erica Michelle Maria Green, that was solved in 2020. The remains of a young girl was found in a cooler in Missouri in 2001 in this cooler, and she was identified. So she was previously a Jane Doe, right? But using the forensic genetic genealogy, they could name her and found out who she was. So we're not just talking about crimes that have been solved, right? Through this, we're also talking about people that were missing and murdered, and they've been Jane Does for years. Their family was still looking for them, and now they have been named. Also, once they've been named, and you can look and see what went on with these victims, what was they doing previously to that, who was they known, which then gives you a much more easier way to investigate. When you find a Jane Doe, a body that you can't identify, it's difficult then to look at their background and what they'd done previously to them being murdered. It really helps the investigation even years down the line. Now, forensic genealogy, as this FGG, has become an invaluable tool in solving cold cases, both in the US and the UK. Various companies actively involved in this field often collaborate with law enforcement agencies to solve these complex cases. Here are some of the notable companies that are in each of these countries. Now, this Paramount Nano Labs, they service genetic genealogy, DNA, and then I think their notable cases, they worked on this Golden State Killer case with others, right? This GEDmatch or GED Match, a public genetic genealogy database. And again, they also worked on the Golden State investigation, amongst others. Family Tree DNA. This is a DNA testing and genetic genealogy. They collaborate with law enforcement agencies for various cold cases. And then we've got Bode Technologies. They are forensic DNA analysis, genetic genealogist. They work on numerous old cases to identify really the remains. So you have one, as I was saying, when you're looking for a Jane Doe or a John Doe, and they're found, who are they? These then use this company, look then at the remains of them to give names. So you've got this genealogy detectives, right? These are genetic genealogy for law enforcement. They assist in solving cases in the UK. They're really good. So a lot of these companies use advanced DNA analysis techniques combined with genealogical research to help law enforcement agencies solve cold cases and identify unknown remains and bring closure to families affected by these crimes. So some of these cases, when you look at them, and I've read a lot of these cases, to tell you the truth, so many. This busking girl, Marcia King in the US, which led to a collaboration with the UK for identifying unknown persons. Forensic genealogy services and living DNA, there's so many. So I think when you were looking at April Jones' case, I don't even remember, this is a UK case. Now, the genealogical detectives, because they couldn't find any really remains of this child, never have, they help law enforcement agencies using genealogy to trace familiar links and gather evidence for investigation. Because they found blood and stuff in the property where she was murdered, it looked like she had either been burnt or whatever, but they got there quick. And I think that's how they knew it was that she had been murdered in that property. But as I said, this case has been solved, but her body has never been found. So when we look at this sort of DNA stuff, right, of course, we're going to have to go over the Golden State Killer and stuff like that. But there are many more. There are many more significant cases and many more perpetrators being removed from our world that we live in to make us safer by using this sort of technique. And as I say, if you want more information on this, drop me a line, or on Murder Analysed, you can go on to the community page and leave some stuff, and I'll start listing some stuff on there as well. Anyway, let's see how this one goes, and I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to now start recording some of the cases. As I said, some of these cases are extremely violent. They are extremely heartbreaking because some of these are children. And many years ago, we say it now, don't we, that we have lots of paedophiles about, lots of child murderers and all this about. Listen, we've always had it, right? We've always had it. We just didn't have the internet. We didn't have this, that and the other. That it made it more known, right? But also we didn't have in them days the ability to catch these terrible criminals. Now we do. So I've hoped you enjoyed this. Hope you're all okay. Keep safe. Keep well. Until the next time.